What is up, everybody, and welcome back to the Cubs Live podcast. I am your host, Kyle Malzhan, alongside co-host Mark Talarico. And as the Cubs finish up their home opening series versus Pittsburgh and look ahead to Atlanta, we're here to discuss everything that went down at Wrigley versus the NL Central leading Pirates. It's kind of weird saying that, even though we're early in, but the Pirates are playing some good ball. So, I mean, it was really, when you look at this Pittsburgh series, it was really nice to see the offense break out a game, scoring 13 runs in a game. We knew at some point that was going to happen. I think the downfall to this series is just the inconsistency within this group. I mean, you win one, you lose one, and you're back to square one. So they're playing 500 ball. I mean, the Cubs now, after losing the series, sit at 6-6 on the season, heading into the series versus Atlanta. So Mark, I got to ask you, what worked this series and what didn't, or what is your outlook on this series?
What worked this series, I think that overall the starting pitching did pretty well. I couldn't really complain too much about how they looked. I think that even today, Hendricks, 6 innings, two-run baseball. He did okay. Nobody really got blew up except kind of Lester did a little bit, but they picked him up because Javi decided to be unbelievable, and Javi worked. That's something that worked right there. Is Javi Baez. Kyle Schwarber, he is starting to see the ball more, and he's starting to hit against the shift better. He's starting to do that better than he has been, and that's going to open up a lot of opportunities for him, I think. Ian Happ has actually quietly been getting there a little bit better. I don't think he's striking out as much. He still has to work on it, but he is improving. And, of course, the one consistent thing in our lineup is Chris Bryant. He's still doing amazing.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, we're going to talk about Javier Baez, and that guy has been super hot as of late. You know, he had a 2-game span where he had 4 home runs and just scorching the ball. But post-game, Baez said he learned something, and that's to set a good example. You know, in that hot span, he actually flew out, threw his bat, and Javi said that player ended up being Pedro Strop, came up to him and said it looked ugly and didn't want that for him to set that kind of example for others. So Baez took that away, and now when Clint Hurdle spoke to the media before, he said Javier Baez needs some respect for the game. To sum it up, really, he said that. And Baez found out about the comments and wasn't pleased at all post-game. Saying that he works his butt off and he respects 90, and basically said it wasn't his place to say it. If anything, he has to apologize to the manager. Now, we know that Javi has a high ceiling. I don't think we've seen him even peak yet, really, or show even signs of it. What are your expectations for Javier Baez? And touch a little bit about this little drama for him and Clint.
Well, something that I've noticed about Javi is that he's looking more consistent and comfortable at the plate. I think that he needs to stay kind of in the 7th spot. He needs to stay in the back of the order where he isn't always, okay, I'm clean up. I have to drive in these runs. I have to do this, because he's the kind of player that he kind of wants to be a hero sometimes, I feel, which is understandable. He's still young, 24, 25. He's young still. But I think that he can be a great player. I mean, the way that he's played, the way that he's been seeing the ball, his OPS is the 2nd best on the team. It's just below Chris Bryant's right now, which I know that there's only been 12 games, but if you're that close to Chris Bryant and you're leading the team in home runs and RBIs, then you're doing something right. And granted, a lot of that production came from the last 2 games in a row, but still, I mean, that's a good sign right there. Now, when it comes to what Clint Hurdle said, I think that that's kind of unprofessional in what he's saying. I think that you should worry about your own team. I mean, I don't know what kind of comments he was saying when Sean Rodriguez was punching that Gatorade bottle, that Gatorade big old thing, the Gatorade tub in the wild card 3 years ago. But I don't think that he needs to stay in his own lane.
Well, yeah, and you're exactly right. You know, like I tweeted out on Cubs Live, I'm not too sure Clint Hurdle really knows. If he's talking about respect, he has to go back to that wild card game where you said Rodriguez was punching Gatorade bottle. You know, they're throwing at Jake Arrieta. I mean, it isn't his place at all. And if anything, it's Madden's to say something, and Madden had no problem with it.
Yeah.
Javi, we know what Javi is. He's a very special player.
Yes.
And if he can eliminate that strike three, swinging in the dirt, trying to be that hero, you're looking at an MVP type caliber player. I mean, the defense is
Absolutely.
there. If he just works on those two things, and he said that he's kind of forgetting post game yesterday. He said that he's forgetting about launch angle. He's forgetting about all these analytics and sabermetrics, that he's just focusing when he gets in that batter's box, that he's just focused on him and the pitcher and exiting everything else. And if he can do that, man, I mean, you're looking at a guy who can hit 30, 40 homers and win a Gold Glove and do all this other stuff. And Javier Baez right now, not even peaking, and he's yet one of the most, if not the most exciting player in baseball to watch, because it's like every time you turn on the Cubs right now, it's like, what is Javi going to do? What did Javi do? Oh, he just dove and made a diving catch to end the game. Oh, wow, that doesn't shock me. We know what Javi's going to do, and that's a special part about him. Now, Kyle Schwarber. You talked about Kyle Schwarber, what he's doing. So Kyle Schwarber has showed some opposite field power by beating the shift. And even after a tough series in Milwaukee, he hits a homer in the final game of the series today, even had a nice sliding grab. So what are your thoughts on Kyle Schwarber? And I mean, it would be huge for Schwarber to beat those shifts and to have that power on that side of the field, or all spots on the field, because I mean, he's looked, despite a really disappointing Milwaukee series from him, he's looked really good. I'm not going to lie. I mean, he's showing opposite field power. He's getting base hits. I mean, he has 3 homers, I want to say. So, I mean, he just hit one today. So, I don't see Kyle Schwarber repeating what he did last year. He's going to have tough stretches. I mean, he's a guy who he isn't a polished hitter yet. He's more so, like everyone says, a DH, a power guy, and he's kind of learning his role, how to get on base, doubles, all that other stuff. But the guy can hit, and there's no doubt about that. So talk to me about Schwarber's improvements.
What I think we're seeing from Schwarber is he had a good start to the season. And then he went downhill in Milwaukee, and now I think he's kind of finding that median. I think that this is going to be the Schwarber that we should expect to see. And I think that that's kind of what is going to be happening with a lot of the players, because a lot of players either start out too strong, they start out not where they need to be, and then this is where they start to kind of get into their zone. They're like, okay, now I know what the grind is like. I know what it's like to have to play baseball every single day, travel all this time, be away from my family, away from all this, and get back into that grind. Because your first couple games, you're going to have so much adrenaline going. I mean, look at Schwarber in the World Series. That was just all adrenaline. That's all that was, and that's why he did so well. But now it's getting into the grind of it. You're starting to get more familiar with it. And I think that we'll start to see more common trends, more long-term trends, not just like hot or not. I think that they're going to be getting towards the median soon.
Now, last season, Joe Madden, he used Kyle Schwarber as a leadoff. And ever since Dexter Fowler left the team, that's been the question. Who do you bet leadoff? Do you risk a guy like Chris Bryant's power ability and put him in the leadoff, which people have been talking about that? Kyle Schwarber, I mean, Ian Happ, Elmore. So, I mean, there's been options. Now, I think right now you just got to do some trial and error with this team. I mean, Madden's a guy, like I've always said, he's a matchup type guy. So you're going to see Happ in there versus right-handed pitching. You're going to see Elmore in there versus left-hand pitching. It's just factual about these guys and how well they do versus the splits and stuff like that. So maybe a little mix of Ben Zobrist there as well. So whoever is scorching the ball really well at the top of the order, I mean, you're setting up guys like Chris Bryant, Anthony Rizzo, Wilson Contreras. What is your thoughts about this leadoff position, and who do you think can excel in that spot going forward?
I think that what we're going to see this year is that it's not going to be an established leadoff guy like it was when we had Dexter Fowler, because Dexter Fowler he was so great. He was a great leadoff hitter. He was exactly what the Cubs needed.
You go, we go.
And
you go,
exactly.
We go.
Yeah. And I don't think Happ is ready for that yet. That's a lot of pressure for somebody, and he hasn't even played a full year of Major League Baseball. And then Elmora also, he was a platoon player. And that's a lot to ask from them. And I think that what we'll see is that it's going to be kind of like a platoon last year with John Jay, but instead it's going to be Zobrist. That's what I expect to see. I think that Zobrist has looked pretty solid. He had a really good start when he was like pinch hitting mostly, but I think that he'll start. He got back to where we should expect him to play. And I think that on days where either Elmora or Happ don't need to be leading off per se, he'll get thrown in there. And I don't see any problem with that, because he has one of the best eyes for the ball, and he has a lot of patience at the plate. And I think that he could get on base.
I'm all here for a Ben Zobrist revival in the lineup.
Yes,
I mean,
absolutely.
he's a guy who is going to he has experience under his belt.
Mm-hmm.
He's a guy who veteran leadership in the clubhouse. Even last year when he was, hurt and, not excelling really well, he was still being that leader type mentality. But if he can get back to being a guy who you can rely on for clutch hits, you're just adding another piece in the lineup. And like you said, he's been scorching the ball this year. I mean, a lot of loud contact from Ben Zobrist, like in the early going, and then even this Pirates series, he's looked good too. Also on Saturday versus the Milwaukee Brewers last weekend, he had the game tying hit. So even though it was a infield single, it doesn't matter. But I think right now, if Ian Happ isn't hitting the ball, you need to start Almora. No matter if you don't like him versus righties, he batted, I think, 270 versus righties, which isn't bad.
No,
So I think because you're not only taking a defensive or an offensive side to kind of give you an offensive power in the lineup if Ian Happ isn't hitting, but you're improving on defense by a ton. Having Amano in center. So that's what I'm thinking. And Zobrist, if he can get back to where he was, I think you're looking at another great leadoff candidate. But
absolutely.
I mean, this bullpen, my man, it's looked very sharp as of recently. I mean, Justin Wilson is a guy we've all had high expectations for this year. He was super sharp on the Tigers and came over midway through last year and just lost it for the Cubs. I mean, Madden couldn't even rely on him. And by the time October was around, he was absolutely forgotten in the mix. Now, this year, we've seen some really good stuff from Justin Wilson, but we've also seen some stuff really bad, posting 14 earned runs in just over 24 innings pitched for the Cubs in his tenure. And to put that into context, Mark, Wilson only allowed 12 runs in 40 innings with the Tigers. So quite the difference there. I mean, the walks are what kills Justin Wilson. His command can be so off so quick. So how far in the season do you think Madden will call on Justin Wilson in key situations? Or how far do you think, or maybe let's say this, maybe Justin Wilson excels in the future. Do you see that before happening? Or what are your expectations for Wilson this year? Now that we've seen him a little bit.
Yeah. Well, you said how he had that many runs in 14 runs in 24 innings pitched. I honestly expected that to be higher. When I saw that number, I'm like, really? He's only given up 14? Because I swear every single time he came in last year, he was giving up a home run. He was walking guys. It was just bad. It was very bad baseball. But what I think the Cubs should do is they should not put him in pressure situations right now. I know that, yes, he's a professional athlete, and yes, like that is his job. But when you have guys like Steve Cishek, Mike Montgomery, you got Carl, Pedro Strop, you have Brandon Morrow, you have all of those guys, and they can't go every day. I understand that. But if I was Joe Madden, I would focus on putting Wilson into a game where either they're down 5 runs or they're up a couple. They're up a good amount, so it's not like, okay, bottom of the 8th inning, Justin Wilson's coming in here. It's a 3-2 game. I don't think he's ready for that yet. And I think that he might have, I don't know if it's the yips, I don't know what it is, but until he can prove himself to pitch well in just regular ball games and prove himself that he can get into those really, important outings, that's where he belongs, in games where it isn't a huge deal.
Yeah, I think right now the biggest thing for Justin Wilson is command, but it's also confidence. He just has to be confident. Like you said, maybe putting him in there when the Cubs have a 5-run lead is what's really going to improve that. Maybe giving him that extra, hey, the game's not on the line for me. If I go in there and can show improvements and help myself be comfortable with myself every time I get in the game, maybe that's something he can bounce up on. I mean, okay, so the Cubs, we had really high expectations, and I think the biggest expectations the Cubs have are because of the 2016 season. I mean, losing 6 games in April, it just doesn't happen. And I think it's very poorly that Cubs fans do have such high expectations because of that, because I don't think we understand how hard that is to start like that. But obviously, when you're playing 500 ball in a 12-game span of a 162-game season, it's going to be overlooked. And, the assumptions and the quick to judge things are all going to be in play. But you're not running behind the fact that the Cubs have a problem right now with runners in scoring position being one. I mean, my question for you, what's going on right now? I mean, I think the Cubs are playing some good ball here and there, but we've also seen games where we've been shut out, we've been beat. I mean, I think a number of things are wrong right now. Like I said, inconsistency. Hitting's contagious, and I think if a few guys are hitting, like the other night, everyone hit in that lineup. They scored 13 runs. Another thing is for Cubs is the starting pitching hasn't recorded an out in the 7th inning. They haven't, which is mind-boggling. We're 12 games in the season. And each time, no starter has gone into the 7th and got it out. And to have success, the Cubs are going to have some starters go the distance here and there. Otherwise, you're asking a lot out of your bullpen. I mean, the bullpen has done excellent thus far. But if you're sitting here in July and August and your starters can't get into the 7th inning, then you have a serious problem. But I don't foresee that happening because this staff's too good of a staff on paper. It all depends how they, pan out. But I think on paper, they're too good of a staff to not do that. I mean, maybe they just have to get the innings in, maybe just get the rust off their shoulders, whatever it is. I think we need a little more consistency, and we need the starting pitching to really step it up, because if you're not getting past the 6th inning, I mean, it's deeper than that. So what's the problem right now, my man? I mean, we're not playing horrible ball, but we're definitely not living up to expectations, and we're not playing the best to our abilities. So what's going on in your eyes?
Well, you said how they're not playing the best of their abilities and they're not living up to the expectations. If you're going to talk about living up to expectations, the Dodgers are 4-7. The Nationals are 6-7. The Yankees are 6-6. And Cleveland's 8-5. So they're not setting the world on fire. There are a lot of teams that they're having this same issue. A lot of the top teams that people predicted to do really well, they aren't doing really well. And it's not the end of the world because it's April. If you're listening to this and you've only been watching baseball for the last couple of years and you notice that the Astros, they ran the table the whole year last year. The Cubs, they ran the table the whole year in 2016. But in 2015, the Royals kind of snuck up on people and they still won the World Series. It is rare that what the 2017 Astros and 2016 Cubs did. It's rare that you truly run the table the whole year. So I don't think that people need to be freaking out about the Cubs right now, because this team, it's a young core, but they have the experience. In 2016, if you look at that team, that was a lot of players, like they were trying to prove themselves. They were like, okay, everybody knows who we are now. We got to go out. We got to do what we can. Like Chris Bryant's like, I won the Rookie of the Year last year, but like I know I could do better. Won an MVP. And now I think that they've been there for a little bit. They've seen that they could get tired towards the end of the year, and they might, I don't know if they're kind of pacing themselves, but I think that could be happening. And with the Cubs, what I've noticed so far is that some players, the only player that's been consistent is Chris Bryant, but that's because he's one of the best players in the league. So best third baseman in the league. But anyways, like he's been consistent, but we've seen people like be hot and then cool off and then get there. It was Javi Baez this past series that absolutely set the world on fire, and now his OPS is over 1,000. He's doing great. And Schwarber, he had a great couple of games here and there, and he's going to be getting there too. I think what we should be expecting to see is players get into their zone. I think that's going to be happening soon. They've been inconsistent, and they've been going from here to there, but we should see a spot where they are going to be consistent, and they're going to be heating up.
Well, I mean, once the weather gets warmer and regular, I mean, the baseballs are going to be flying out of the bleachers from Schwarber and Chris Bryant, and, you're going to get your hot streaks. So that's not a concern for me for the Cubs later on in the season. I think right now getting in the consistency, and like you said, like 2016 players had something to prove. I mean, they were upset about how they ended 2015 getting swept for the Mets, and not even the Mets, just Daniel Murphy, I think. And then, and then they had everything behind their backs, like the 108 years and everything else. They had to prove themselves, like that. And now maybe it's just, starting things off earlier, taking things in stride. So I mean, this team's good, and we're in for a buckle ride in the NL Central because you also have a hot Brewers team. I mean, who knows if the Pirates stay up with the Cubs, and St. Louis is always going to be St. Louis. So fun baseball going to be played this summer, and hopefully the Cubs can get those 6, 7, 8 game winning streaks at sometimes, time periods, because those are what really makes a team. So, like we said, the Cubs lose the series versus Pittsburgh in their home opening series, and we move on to Atlanta and welcome them in. I mean, Atlanta comes to Wrigley this weekend 7-5, and while the Cubs sit at 6-6, I mean, you're going to see Darvish versus Sanchez, Quintana versus Newcomb, and Chatwood versus Tehran. So the fans this weekend are actually going to see Darvish's Wrigley debut. So when you're looking at this series, who should we keep an eye on pitching and hitting wise? I mean, hopefully you see a hot Javier Baez again. Hopefully Wilson Contreras can maybe get his first homer as a Cub, and hopefully Rizzo comes back after this series and you rely on him later on. But who are you looking at right now to keep a pitching and hitting wise on?
Pitching, I think that the first two pitchers we're going to be seeing with Anibal Sanchez and Sean Newcomb, I think that they have a high strikeout rate. They have a high K per 9. And I think that might cause some trouble for the Cubs because we know how they strike out. Their numbers, I mean, they both give up ERAs in the fours. Sanchez, he's only pitched 8 innings this year. He's posted 2.25, so he's done well, but he hasn't really lasted too long in the 2 appearances he's had. Newcomb, he is a career 4.32 ERA in 15 starts, so nothing to write home about, but once again, he gets a lot of strikeouts. Tehran, he's off to a very rough start. His ERA is at 7 through 14 innings this year, so I'm really hoping that the Cubs can blow him up. Will that be a Quintana matchup or no, that'll be Chatwood, I think.
Chatwood. That's Chatwood.
Yeah, that'll be Chatwood. So hopefully they could get something to back up Chatwood because I feel like he needs to get his confidence boosted up. When it comes to players, obviously Freddie Freeman. Freddie Freeman's very good. His OPS is over 1.1 right now. He is off the charts. He's driven in 11 RBIs. Ozzie Albies, he has 4 home runs already, OPS in 900. And Dansby Swanson, he's producing a lot of runs with 8 RBIs, and his OPS is 940. So it's not a super lethal lineup, really, but they get on base and they produce a pretty solid amount of runs.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited for Darvish to pitch, and hopefully, like you said, that the Cubs can tack on some versus Tehran because, like, Chatwood needs some confidence. I mean, he has good stuff. He just made a few mistakes, and the defense wasn't behind him really too much either. So the Cubs are right there, and I'm excited for this Atlanta series, first weekend series at Wrigley. So the stands and everybody in the grandstands should be bumping. I mean, hopefully we can get some good weather. I'm not too sure what the forecast is like, but hopefully we can get each game in. I know up here in Wisconsin, we're supposed to get, I think, like 7 to 12 inches of snow up here. So this weekend, so we're not looking too hot, but good thing we're not in Wisconsin and they're in Illinois. So yeah, it's going to be a fun series. I mean, hopefully we might see some pitching duos with Darvish and Quintana going versus Sanchez and Newcomb, but hopefully this offense, I mean, when you're playing in April and May in Wrigley, the wind is a huge factor because days it can blow out and days it can blow in, and it can really come bite you in the butt. So hopefully the weather cooperates as well now. When should we expect the Cubs to turn it on? I mean, like, really turn it on, because I mean, even though they just scored 13 runs, this lineup, you saw a taste of what they can do to opposing pitching, and bullpens really beat them up. I mean, if you got Anthony Rizzo and, I mean, Victor Caratini was even hitting the ball, and he won't be in the lineup. I don't foresee him being in the lineup come July. So when should we expect the Cubs to turn it on?
Well, something that needs to be noted is that while this is one of, I think, the more overrated stats in baseball, the Cubs' leading run producer for the last however many years, Anthony Rizzo, he hasn't played. He hasn't been playing. And while RBI is just one stat, he drives in so many runs and he isn't there. So when that's out of the lineup, then that's kind of a problem, I think. So I think once he gets back, he's the captain of the team. He is going to lead that ball club, and I think that they might be missing that right now. I think that once they just kind of gel, once they kind of feed off of each other, and once they gel together and find their like happy little medium, they'll be good. Some things that are encouraging, I'm going to say, some things that are really encouraging that I don't know if people have noticed is that Chris Bryant, he has 8 walks so far this year and 7 strikeouts. That is kind of ridiculous. That's really good. And that's very good for Chris because we know how he struggled with strikeouts towards the earlier parts of his career. So to see that number, that walk to strikeout ratio get better, that's really important. And something that I noticed today that I've been thinking about, but I wasn't really sure, while Wilson Contreras has an OPS right around 900, he doesn't have a single RBI. He doesn't have a single one yet. In 10 games, he doesn't have a single RBI. He has 5 doubles in 10 games, but he has 0 runs batted in, no home runs, and we all know that Contreras, he could hit 30 in a year, I think. He really could. So I think that we should expect to see him start hitting it farther, I guess we'll say. I've seen him have a couple – he's had his little, like, bat flips, and then it just kind of flies out about 380 feet. But I think that this next series, I'm fully expecting Contreras to hit 1 or 2 out.
You know how big of a Contreras guy I am. So, I mean, he's had a lot of right center power this year. So that's a huge plus. And like we said, the RBIs and homers are going to come. It's just setting him up and guys above him setting him up for him. Because when he's in the 4-hole and he's on, I mean, we saw it in last year in August, how lethal that bat can be. I mean, if he's going, this team is scoring runs. They're getting hits. They're doing everything. They're moving guys around. So I hope Wilson Contreras has in the near future has a good start to the season. I mean, like you said, Chris Bryant is a guy who is becoming a polished hitter. We knew he was good. I mean, the accolades speak for itself. We all know he is a rookie of the year and MVP. But after winning an MVP, I mean, he could be content and he could, I hit homers, but that's not the player he is. He wants to get better. So his dad's a hitting coach. He works with his dad. He wants to lower his strikeouts, which is key not only for him but the team. Like I don't think we talk enough about it, about how great of a guy Chris Bryant is silently, because he's not the guy to showboat. He's not the guy to go post picks after the games. He's not, that type of guy. He does it all because he's humble. And I mean, for him to work on his strikeouts. And like you said, that stat, so many, having more walks than strikeouts right now, if he can continue that, that's ridiculous for a guy who early on in his career has struck out a lot, but he keeps on lowering it by the years. So, I mean, if we're looking 5 years down the road, I mean, who knows how good this guy can be. So yeah, I hope the Cubs can turn on real quick here. I mean, when the weather gets nicer and the ivy starts getting green, we're going to see this team really excel, get in their, their grind and get in their niche and just go. Now, before we wrap this thing up, Cubs Live beat writer Ryan Malzhan, he lives 3 blocks away from Wrigley and is a season ticket holder. So he actually attended the final game for the Pirates series today. And Mark and I, on behalf of Cubs Live, have officially banned Ryan from Wrigley Field this year. I mean, StatCast and analytics show that since Ryan has entered Wrigley Field, the Cubs will lose and are on pace for 2 out of every 3 games. So I actually just got the call from Ricketts to pass along. And unfortunately, Ryan couldn't make it to this podcast tonight. So Ryan, buddy, if you're listening, I'm sorry, but you're no longer allowed at Wrigley. So you might be the curse this year. I'm not too sure, but we're only kidding. Ryan, you got anything, or Mark, you got anything to tell Ryan?
I know how you feel because I think I had a 6-game Wrigley losing streak going on from the last 3 years. In 2015, I went to a game that I think they lost. It was Arrieta's one loss that he had the second half of the season. I was at that game, and then I was also at the game in 2016 that was Arrieta's first bad game as like a Cub, basically his first non-quality start. I finally broke the curse last year, so it's possible, but you got to stay with it. You got to, I don't know.
Ryan's a season ticket holder, so, I mean, he's going to be at plenty of games. So hopefully he can give this team good luck on Cubs Live behalf. I was at, that you talk about the 2015 season. I got the chance to go to an early May game, May 1st, actually. It was Addison Russell's first homer as a Cub. He hit it 1-0 shutout versus the Milwaukee Brewers, and John Lester got his first win as a Cub that game as well. So that even though it was a pitcher's duel, it was a super cool game. That season, I also went down to, how Arrieta had that ridiculous run in 2015. Me and my roommate actually went down there. It was a Sunday night baseball game versus the Pittsburgh Pirates. I mean, Arrieta was unstoppable during that span. It was September 27th of 2015, and Arrieta He took a no-hitter into the 6th inning, and before that, he hit a homer in like the 3rd or 4th inning. Wrigley went nuts, got a curtain call. Second time up, he hits one to the deepest part of the ballpark you can imagine. Dude was on the fence. He almost hit 2 homers. It was ridiculous. And then I went to in 2016, I got down to Wrigley, and I watched them clinch the division. I mean, they clinched the night before, but then so they were playing all their like scrubbier players, as you want to say, like a Tommy La Stella type deal. Like they had Tommy La Stella, they had Kawasaki in the lineup. So it was kind of like, oh crap, it sucks seeing these guys play. But they ended up recapping a comeback versus the Milwaukee Brewers, and we got to celebrate on a Miguel Montero walk-off. So a lot of fun games I've seen at Wrigley, and that was kind of cool because we all stayed in like the Cubs side of the ballpark for like 20, 30 minutes after the game and just celebrate. Like they came out with champagne and was spraying it on us. So that was super cool. I'll never forget that. But as we wrap things up here, the Cubs fall and lose the series to the Pirates and sit at 6-6 on the season, and welcome in the Braves at Wrigley this season. First weekend series at Wrigley Field for the 2018 season. I'm Kyle Malzhan. He's Mark Talarico. Thanks for tuning into the Cubs Live podcast, and go Cubs.